been fighting a long time, and we have all lost so very much, so many loved ones gone. But you are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Ave Maria Stella, Dei Mater Alma, atque semper Virgo, Felix te
Hey everybody, Steve with Sons Fidelum coming at you once again with the Center for Economic and Social Justice. This time, the Grand Poobah of the group, Norman Kurland. So if you have any Norm jokes from Cheers, afternoon everybody. Norm, take it away. So Norm, good morning. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much for having the opportunity.
No problem. So before you tell us the story of life's work with the Just Third Way, could you define briefly what is the Just Third Way of economic personalism?
That's great. Yeah. No, the Just Third Way is saying that neither the socialists or communists on the left, nor the capitalists on the right, really are going to be able to make America what it could be, or what Ronald Reagan said as a result of learning of our ideas. He says he called for this was a second American Revolution. And if you go to our website, for example, at cesj.org, and look at the video and listen to Reagan when we were working to democratize ownership in Central America and the Caribbean. And so we had a presidential task force. We were able to get the legislation through the Congress because we didn't ask for a penny from the taxpayer. And we're an all volunteer operation, by the way. We've been that way since we were formed in 1984. But in any event, what we're talking about are changes mainly in the monetary system and the tax system, because much of our tax follows Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto. That was one of his 10 points. I graduated in progressive income tax, comes right out of Marx. Mm-hmm. And of course, Marx, if most people have not read the Communist Manifesto, and there Marx says you can summarize our entire philosophy in a single sentence. Abolish what? Private property. And that's what I want to talk about today. How private property is not only a fundamental human right. As a matter of fact, after the Second World War, when the UN was formed, Article 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says every person, that means child, woman, man, every person, and they're talking about throughout the world, has the right to be an owner of property, personally, as well as in association with others. And the interesting thing is, no country yet has established the laws to bring that about, and that's what we're looking at. How you change a system. I would hope that America would be the source of these. And
actually, they're trying to do the opposite right now.
Pardon? Oh, it's a total opposite. On the other hand, I think that this president, rather than Trump knew of our ideas, never did anything. This president doesn't really know, even though we've had laws that have enabled workers in the private sector to become owners without putting up any of their own money. We got the laws called employee stock ownership plans when I worked with the founder of these ideas, who well after I finished law school and was working for the government for 5 years after that, and then was going to quit the government because I found that in trying to address the issues of poverty, it was missing something that in any event, and that was maximum feasible participation of the poor in the process, not just welfare, not just, that was not the solution, or government jobs. That was not the solution. And when I wrote the guidelines for the poverty program to bring about that language, which was in the law, setting up the poverty program in 1965. And I got hired and wrote the guidelines for maximum feasible participation. And when I was put in a position where I could get money to grassroots organizations, then whoever was above me didn't like it. And so when that happened, because I felt that they were violating a principle that was fundamental to solve poverty, and didn't know of the ideas that I'm going to describe in a little while, I said, I'm quitting. I don't want to work anymore for the federal government. And so the day I decided to quit, I was out in San Francisco, providing money to grassroots organizations in Arizona, California, Nevada. I said, I'm coming home. My wife and kids were left in the Washington area. I was deciding whether to move. And I said, no, I'm going home. And somebody stepped into my office and described the ideas of a man named Louis Kelso. I had never heard of him. He wrote a book challenging Marx, and they used to he and Mortimer Adler, the great books philosopher, who was initially a Jew. He became a Catholic before he died. A brilliant man, great books. He was the person who headed up the great books programs. And he also taught at the University of Chicago Law School, that's where I studied. But he taught justice before I got there. But anyway, he collaborated with Kelso. He was originally a socialist. When he heard Kelso's ideas, he responded the way I did in 15 minutes. I said, why didn't I think of that? It's so simple. And it was basically the idea of how to use the money system correctly so that everybody has an equal opportunity to own, even if they had no savings. Wow. That was the first book, The Capitalist Manifesto, describing what justice is in chapter 7. And that got me. But then they had a second book, even before I knew of them. It was called The New Capitalists. And in that, they described the money system in such a way that made a lot of sense to me. I studied economics as well as law at the University of Chicago, but they didn't teach what Kelso said, and that is you don't need past savings. What you need is to be able to purchase capital, shares of capital that represent growth in the economy, and use future savings coming from the profits of the shares that you buy. Now that works. As I say, we have we got the laws through Congress because we found one of the most powerful senators. And Kelso and I met with him, Senator Russell Long, the son of Huey Long. And I thought he was going to be the enemy because of something that had occurred before we met him. But he learned of Kelso's books, and I got a call from Kelso. I was then his Washington counsel. He was a lawyer in San Francisco, and we formed an institute where we got people from the left, people from the right together because they agreed with Kelso's ideas. Prominent people, but also people from the civil rights movement. The head of CORE, Marion Barry, who later became the mayor of Washington, D.C., and people involved in Mexican American problems throughout the country. And in any event, we formed the Institute for the Study of Economic Systems, and Kelso and I was the executive director. I was working out of Washington, and eventually we got most important. We had a few senators who became interested. Both Republicans, conservative Republicans, as well as Hubert Humphrey, later in 1967, when he was head of the Joint Economic Committee, called for broad-based ownership as a new policy over and above full employment, which had been the policy since the Second World War. When the troops came back, we found ways to hire people to get hired. And the idea was something that both left and right were always working, as if the economy is strictly to create jobs, but not ownership. And so a few people figured out how to develop a monetary system that allowed a few people to own. And so in America, a tiny fraction of people own more than the bottom 90% of people. And so Kelso's idea would enable everyone from the time they're born to the time they die to have access to capital credit through the banking system and the Federal Reserve that would be repaid out of the future profits of the company. And that would include the richest as well as the poorest citizen of America. And as I say, America and Ronald Reagan back in 1988, when I was able, I was no longer working with Kelso, but I was able to harness or get both the left and the right, who were backing us, to back a presidential task force on Project Economic Justice, it was called. And that was the time when Ronald Reagan was president. But Ronald Reagan was a supporter of Kelso while he was still a governor of California. And his speech to Young Americans for Freedom on Kelso was just terrific. And he wrote articles in many journals and so on. But we had both Republicans and Democrats, but not until we could get Senator Long I had, for example, we both Kelso and I were hired by a group called the National Maritime Union to try to save the passenger vessels that the taxpayers had paid for. But the owners of the vessels wanted to sell it to the vessels, and the union came to me, particularly the person who headed up the Port of Baltimore for Tom Martinez. And he said, I'm hearing this thing about ESOP. What is this ESOP? And so we talked, and we became close friends, and they hired us to try to save those vessels so that the ownership of the vessels could be the workers and managers of the passenger vessels. But so they took it. The president of the union took it to Russell Long to get his support, because he was also not only the head of the finance committee, which are very powerful, writing the tax laws, but he was also on the commerce committee, and that's where the decision had been made. And he told the president he didn't have Kelso or I with him, but he was asking for Senator Long to support it. And Senator Long said, it sounds like one of my daddy's programs, Make Every Man a King. Well, when I heard that, the vessels were sold, probably the same people, but they operated either in Central America or in Africa, out of Africa. But in any event, so I was reluctant to go anymore for Senator Long. And then one day I got a call from Kelso. He said, Norm, set up an appointment with Senator Long. He wants to meet with us. Wow. What is this? So anyway, this was in 1973. Okay. We go there, and it's all the meeting. It's 60 Minutes did a show. Mike Wallace, 60 Minutes, and it's on our video section. If you go to the video section, you'll hear Kelso, Senator Long, and Paul Samuelson, the Nobel Prize winner. And if you watch that, you'll wonder how he ever got a Nobel Prize. The comments were terrific, to really challenge. And I've had the same problem with Milton Friedman. If you go to our article section, exchange of letters between Friedman and I, you'll wonder what the heck are these economists teaching? He was against it, and I was in favor of. When I studied economics at the University of Chicago, it was with his brother-in-law, and I read his what's called Capitalism and Freedom. I said, oh, he's right about the market system. This is before I heard of Kelso. He's right about the market, because he said a market system, and he used the term, it's the most democratic way of determining value. And I thought, I liked the concept of democracy. So I bought into Kelso's, Friedman's idea. And then he had some kind of a giveaway, I forget what it was called, the welfare program that he was suggesting. But in any event, that was all before I met Kelso, learning about Friedman's stuff. But then later on, I was at a conference at the University of Chicago, and taking the same position as Friedman on the draft. I spent 5 years as an officer in the Air Force, electronic countermeasures officer during the Korean War, and I liked. I felt that once I learned the Kelso's ideas, I said, Friedman, we're both on the same. There was a conference on the draft, and we both took the same position on the draft. Basically, I said, you ought to pay people to defend the country, even though I went in with a direct commission to the Air Force for 5 years, and so we're both taking the same position on that at the University of Chicago conference. But this is after I learned the Kelso. And it was even before I started working with Kelso. I was then I was a director of planning for something called the Citizens Crusade Against Poverty, which was basically a liberal group with all the civil rights leadership, and it even had grassroots leaders from all over the country, and so a fellow, he was a descendant of Daniel Boone, Dick Boone, who had written the language into the poverty program, hired me when I first went to quit the federal government. Before that, and he asked me to write the language on maximum feasible participation. Well, he was also a friend of Bob Kennedy, and Dick headed this Citizens Crusade Against Poverty. And he liked, when he heard from me about Kelso, I had discovered Kelso, and he was open, and we had Kelso talk to 1,000 people in Washington at the first annual conference, grassroots leaders and all. In any event, Kelso gave a great talk and just said that they should study it. Well, a lot of the so-called liberals didn't even want to think about it, but the grassroots people who were there said, we like what you're saying, and they voted to make this a resolution. Okay, these are all little things to tell you that you come in with a new paradigm, you got real problems. It takes time for people to open their minds. Now, Walter Reuther, who was the head of the United Auto Workers, most powerful labor leader, very articulate person, listened to Kelso, and in 1947, he testified. What I say? 47? No, it had to be. Let's see. I left. It was 65, 66, 67. Walter Reuther testified before the Joint Economic Committee, where they were losing workers in competition with Japanese workers for the production of automobiles. And he came out and said, if we could get profits, and this was Kelso's point, if profits became a way of increasing rather than wages, our costs for marketing throughout the world would be stabilized, and we get, because profits are there after all costs, and after you sell, it's above whatever costs you have. So if you can reduce costs of money, you'll have more profits, assuming that you're producing something that people in the market can purchase. But the biggest thing still missing was ownership, using the finance system to the monetary system. And that's where, I was going to spend some time reading some of the ideas behind this, and the people throughout history who were for ownership, particularly the founders of America. The only problem with the founders of America is that they turned some people into things, the slaves. And there were compromises and differences between the North and the South on that. But basically, they didn't treat the slaves as people. They were less, 3/5 of a person. But in any event, the point is that once we recognize that there's only one race, it's the human, we're all humans. That's what it comes down to. And that's very key to my thinking, the key to Mike Graney and Dawn, who learned of this stuff. Well, Dawn is my daughter, by the way. She was a graduate. My wife went to work at Georgetown and was able to get our 3 kids free tuition at Georgetown, and they graduated from Georgetown, a great university, and so this is the team working, and so in any event. Now, what did Kelso say about money? I'd like to point out that was the biggest thing that he was adding. What is money, and how can a money credit be available to people who have no savings but can invest in sound stock? There are ways that what you have to have is credit insurance, so that if it isn't a feasible project, the bank will not make a loan. But banks that's their function in the world. And the central bank, if you read certain sections, Section 13 of the Federal Reserve Act, it was called bills of exchange. These are instruments in which the central bank can create money, and it always should be backed by assets. But today, what did I got some, the amount of debt is let me just give you this thing that I was getting to prepare. The federal government has now not billions but trillions of debt, and much of it has no backing. That's one of the problems that we have. And we're saying that we have to go back to a simple proposition that there must always be assets behind money. Mm-hmm. Because as you, I'm sure, are aware, that counterfeiting is when you create money that has nothing behind it, either a productive assets or consumption for the purpose of production and consumption in a market economy should be in balance. The purpose of production is consumption, and you can't consume if it isn't being produced. In the meantime, we have so much incredible new technologies today. One of the quotes that I love is, I was going to start by giving the quote of a man named Buckminster Fuller, a great thinker in terms of what the development of advanced technology. And Bucky says, we're called to be architects of the future, not its victims. Our challenge, and I love this quote, our challenge is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time with spontaneous cooperation and without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. I love that. Why not? And then, well, Kelso was, if you look at Kelso's definition of money, he says, money is not part of the physical system, or you can say currency it's a form of, it's the government printing piece of paper. No, but money is supposed to be a measure of value, a way, he called it a yardstick of value, in which all kinds of transactions, both sides, both the buyers as well as the sellers, if it's going to be a fair exchange, they both pretty much think that whatever they're getting is equal to what they're giving. Or maybe they think it's a little bit better, but essentially it's the market system that determines what the value of money should be. But it isn't, because now they're printing, as I said, $30 trillion in different forms. Where's it going to come from?
Yeah, I have to send you a clip from Clark and Dawes, this Australian comedy duo on YouTube, where he talks about it. How they print out the money. He goes through his little menu. He goes, face the printer to the window. He goes, face the printer. Yes, because it causes a vacuum. Cover your eyes and hit print. And it's supposed to the money just shoots out of the printer.
Yeah. And you see, and China has 5 different currencies, and they're going out. We had Humphrey Fellows. We were training. They wanted to. They came here. They were enrolled in Boston University, but they wanted to be interns of our center. And all of them were Muslims, frankly. There's one from. One was from Morocco, for example, who had been in the central bank of Morocco. He loved these ideas, and because we're talking about economic democracy, and he was also a law professor. He's a judge today, anyway, he was one. But then you had one in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, the Chinese put in a lot of money for one of the most productive plants in Ethiopia. Who owns it? The Chinese. You see, and they're going all over the world getting scarce resources by negotiating with leaders in these countries. But the point we make is, okay, that's current leadership. and I can tell you, I've been to about 8 different African countries with these who found out about our ideas, including South Africa. This before during the before Mandela was released, I got invited by some of the leaders in South Africa to come there and talk about employee stock ownership plans, which we were doing. And now they're in America, there are 14 million workers who become owners through the CSOPs. But I won't do any more now, because I really think we have to go beyond. What about the teachers? What about the professors? What about government employees and so on? Why not everybody becoming an owner, even those who can't get a job? Because we have technology that can, you have automated factories, artificial intelligence, robotics, etc. That's making that work is now being shifted. And the question is, who owns the robots? Who owns the artificial? And you could have joint ownership of these things and financing it, and the whole world. You see, I see if America becomes the leader of this idea, if we can get to President Biden, I think he has to. He's got to find a solution. It's not just creating jobs, and it's not welfare. As a matter of fact, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican anymore, because I don't think either side, but there are Democrats and Republicans among them who are open-minded to these ideas. And I think when teachers, most important, law teachers and economic teachers begin trying to find holes in what we're saying here, I think then I think America will be ready for a just third way, and the whole world will respond, because all we can do is show them how it's done, instead of just the Central Bank of America. Well, why not a global bank? And there was one guy I remember. He had been in the Second World War, and he was a bomber pilot. He was he was also on Broadway. Danny Kaye's, his name was Gary. He was a person who worked with Danny Kaye and even substituted for him when Danny Kaye was his name's Gary Davis. Gary was his father was one of the celebrated orchestra leaders here in Washington. Mm-hmm. And Gary, his brother was killed as a pilot. He became a pilot, and he was in bombing Germany, going from England and with bombing Dusseldorf and other cities. And suddenly it occurred to him, my God, these are not people in the war. These are innocent people. So he was shot down, came back to America, and then decided he was against war. And Gary became very famous in France because he came up with an idea of global government. He came back to Washington in the 70s, and I met with him, and I said, Gary, I'm not for any world government because I'm worried of the power of government unless you had a money system first that enabled every citizen of the world to provide them an allotment of capital credit so that they can grow their economies, finance that growth in ways in which every citizen would be an owner. Then economic power is not in the state. The state depends whether it's a global state. But he became Camus and Sartre and many others who really thought Gary had it. He renounced his U.S. citizenship and became what he called, they called him, even Einstein talked about him, and Eleanor Roosevelt knew of Gary. And so he wrote, then after I talked with him, he wrote an article. He wrote a number of books on his work. And one article, which is on our website in the article section, Who Owns the World? Basically, he talked about Kelso and my contributions to his thinking. But in any event, I think this idea should first come with America. If it makes any sense, try to challenge it, that's fine. But I have yet to hear any point that makes me, a challenge. We've heard challenges, but none of them make any sense at all. It's just it's ignorance. It comes out of ignorance of people protecting that. But ideas that are as big as this, to me, until I hear somebody tell me what's wrong with it. I mean, Steve, maybe you.
Well, you got the global takeover going on right now, as we were talking off air about the reset, which is basically a rebranding of the New World Order. Yeah. They want global governance. They want global currency. They want to get rid of currency and establish their own. They want to do the technology, which you talked about, but they don't want it to be good for humanity. They want it to take over humanity and kick you out of jobs and
I know.
Give you the universal basic income.
It's incredible. Well, people who would rather dominate than, but that's not moral. Why shouldn't there be? Well, I could read to you a number of, Leo the 13th. Every man has by nature the right to possess property as his own. This is one of the chief points of distinction. This is 1891. Mm-hmm. He's writing. It's one of the chief points of where was that? Oh yeah, points of distinction between man and animal creation. And then he goes on, the fact that God has given the earth for the use and enjoyment of the whole human race can in no way be a bar to the owner, to the owning of private property. And then you got, you had, so here Leo, and I got other quotes from Leo, and then 30 years later, Pope Pius XI talks about the Creator himself has given man the right of private ownership, not only that individuals may be able to provide for themselves and their families, but also that the goods that the Creator destined for the entire family of mankind may, through this institution, truly serve its purpose. And then, so he's talking about social justice. And that's he was the basis for Father Ferry in his book and articles on social. If you look at what Mike and I wrote an introduction to social justice. It was called A New Look at Social Justice by Ferry. And it was clear. Ferry's version of social justice was what Martin Luther King would call peaceful people power. And I got some quotes from King, and I was gonna.
Well, then the antithesis of all what you just said is what Davos is running up, which you will own in 2030. You will own nothing, and you'll be happy.
Oh God. Yeah, somebody else. So you depend on someone else for the food that you have, for the house that you have, for transportation, for everything. Oh, you'll be happy.
I was telling him off camera, ladies and gentlemen, he didn't know about the reset this much. I'm going to send him so many links. He's going to have a field day with this stuff.
No, honestly, the very fact you've been, you've talked to Dawn, you've talked to Mike. And you seem to like what you're hearing. From what I understand, I don't know that you have any reservations of what they've said. Maybe it isn't enough, but we got these books. My God, we had one called "Curing World Poverty: The New Role of Property," which Father John Miller from the Social Justice Center in St. Louis. He was the editor, and we had writings by Kelso, Mike Graney, a whole bunch of people. One of the wealthiest Mexican American capitalists wrote an article, and people.
Who are some of the major how would you say, thinkers behind this idea of economic personalism?
I would say Michael, Dawn, and what we have on our website. So free books. It isn't going to cost people anything to read the two major books by Kelso, the Capitalist Manifesto. But he no longer used the term capitalism. It is not a good term. And the word capitalism was not invented by capitalists. It was invented by socialists because capital are things. So this is thingism. That's what I call it. So Kelso began talking about two-factor theory or binary economics, and that's afterwards. But it was a bestseller. The first book was a bestseller when it first came out. And we had, as I say, we had people from the very right to the people from the very left. I've talked to communists. I was invited to China after they were engaging in privatization. So, the chairman of the Duma committee on privatization came here, heard a talk by me, and then invited me to go there. He was a communist to begin with. But he got me together with professors there, and he asked me. Well, I have letters from him to represent him before the IMF and the World Bank and so on. But we did make our effort, but they weren't ready. I think they're going to be more ready today, and that's what we need. We need people like you, Steve. You're open-minded. And if you hear something that isn't making sense, you're going to ask, and that's all we can do. And it's not me. I'm close to 91, so I don't have that much longer to be around here. But it's important that suddenly people, let me read to you some of the things. I know he's very controversial, but to read you some of the things that interested me in Pope Francis. I know that he's very controversial, and I know the problems that he's going through, but there's a couple of things that he said it's the Evangelii Gaudium back in 2013. He says, human beings are themselves considered consumer goods to be used and then discarded. We have created a disposable culture, which is now spreading. It is, and then he said, in the same, let me get the other. I think that he should. I know he's been meeting with a lot of socialists. When he gathered a bunch of people, and there were a couple of people at the Vatican who were trying to get us to meet with him. Mike wrote an article on Pope Francis. So, I think we have to find a way. I'm looking for some of the other things by Francis. But founders of America were saying these things. Here.
Yeah, not everything Francis has said. I know he's controversial. Has been wrong. He said some good things. He's also written some really bad things.
This is it's unclear his position. And what has he said that was bad? Let me ask that. What specifically? And I'm not saying, because there were people at the Catholic University in Argentina. There's a professor there, a woman, who was prepared to go there, and because she buys into what we're talking about. But what is it that specifically? What has he said? Because when I read some of the quotes I had, here's some of the others. Some people continue to defend trickle-down theories, which assume that economic growth encouraged by a free market will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by the facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power. Then he says, those wielding, and in the socialized working of the prevailing economic system. Meanwhile, the excluded are still waiting. And then he said, one cause of this situation is found in our relationship with money, since we calmly accept its dominion over ourselves and our societies. The current financial crisis can make us overlook the fact that it originated in a profound human crisis, the denial of the primacy of the human person. So when I read that, I say, could I challenge that? No. He needs to hear from us. We met with, as a matter of fact, when I was appointed by President Reagan as the deputy chair of the Presidential Task Force. And if you go to our video section, you'll hear President Reagan calling for, well, first recognizing my role, but then calling for a second American Revolution. I love that, second American, because that's what we need. Start again, fresh, with whatever truths that Kelso brought into the world, simple truths. But he wasn't alone. I found the people in other countries, quotes going back a couple hundred years in Catholic sources, non-Catholic sources all over the world, which were supportive of these ideas. If you go to our quote section, you get a whole batch more than I pulled out of it. But it's an issue of power, and if you concentrate power, you ensure corruption.
So what can people do to help you guys out or promote you, to boost you guys up? What can people do to help you out?
Just give us an opportunity to teach. That's it. What? Go to our website, read the books, and then challenge us.
What's the website again?
I do think the books are pretty clear, and we got a lot of people who support it. If you just look at the website, who are we, and you look at the many people who are involved. We had not only Father Ferry, but Father Morleone, who was in the Dominican order, one of the leaders. He was a former atheist. He headed up one of the mobs in Belgium, and then he became a Catholic. And then he was a founder of the International University for Social Work in Rome. Mm-hmm. Now he was a revolutionary, and he was one of our founders, and he was very well known. As a matter of fact, Pope, it had to be John Paul, at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vatican sent him to be the negotiator with the Cubans. on the
Disarmament.
the problem. Yeah, right. To avoid. Remember, Russia was going to send atomic bombs.
Everybody was supposed to hide underneath their desk, and because desk
he was but you bring what we had Farie and Morleone together. It was really funny. I mean, they were really two great minds.
So what's the website again? I know it's the Center for Economic and Social Justice, but what's the website?
www.cesj.org.
Easy enough.
And if you can get some, the people that you respect to spend, study it, look at. I think the website, just the home page. For example, there are 6 slides on the home page which says everything with the pictures, and so everything that I've said are said better.
Very good.
Slides.
Well, Norman, appreciate your time, and everyone check it out, www.cesj.org. .org, right?
Right.
.org. And check out the website, and send them your qualms, I guess.
Well, this is great. I mean, you've given us plenty of time. My God. So I think we're going to wake up the politicians. As I said, I was telling you about with Senator Long. Mm-hmm. You imagine. We went to there's an article called Dinner at the Madison Hotel in Washington. Kelso always stayed there. Very expensive. But when we met with Senator Long, he was involved in some political thing. And so he said, wait till after this is over and we'll all go out to dinner together. Well, can you imagine a politician who picked up the bill for 4 of us? It was Long and his assistant who discovered Kelso, and then me and Kelso, and is back and forth with Kelso, and we're just sitting there, and I already had a bill with bipartisan support, including Hubert Humphrey and conservatives as well, and Republicans, to when the Penn Central went bankrupt, we were offering a third alternative to subsidizing it, Conrail, what became Conrail. And we wanted it to be 100% owned by the workers. And so we had this support, but none of them were members of the Commerce Committee. Mm-hmm. So in the conversation with Senator Long, after it was about 3.5 hours we're with him, and he said to Kelso, now, who's against this? And Kelso said, well, a couple of Nobel Prize winners, Samuelson and Friedman, are against it. And Long said, when I first came to the Senate after his father was assassinated, his father was a threat to FDR in the 1936 campaign, because he had this clubs all over the country. But his was socialist approach, take over the oil companies, and spread it out to the people. But so Senator Long said, let me tell you, when I first came here, I said to myself, I'm going to try to follow this principle. I really don't care who's right. I care what's right. I'm going to try to follow that. This is right. So, and so he said he would only go for worker ownership. Now, obviously, it would have been great to get him to say everybody, but And then he, after it was over, he said, "What are you people doing about it?" And I said, well, then I raised my voice. Senator, we have a bill, we have so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so behind it, but none of them are members of the right committee, the Commerce Committee. You are. He says, you bring me something tomorrow morning. So I brought him what we were proposing, and that's a story in itself. If you read Dinner at the Madison, you'll see. And so they ended up with, the workers ended up with something, even though it was being done at the last minute. And Senator Long was really enthusiastic. This was a big thing. And in any event,
hopefully nobody asked, where did that happen? It was at the Madison.
It was at the Madison, right? Yeah, Dinner at the Madison. It's in the articles. The articles section will give you, articles by Kelso, articles by me, Mike Rainey, Dawn. So I count very heavily on both Mike and Dawn at this point, because I don't have the memory that I used to have. So, I'm not, but in any event, as I say, that website is the key to the books, to videos, all kinds of things. My testimony before the Congressional Black Caucus. It's a short video, 10 minutes. I was asked to be part of the panel, and then there was about a 5-minute. There were questions to me that were published, but I had a whole bunch of people in the Congressional Black Caucus supporting these ideas, I'm very proud of the work I did in Mississippi and from 62 to 64, and very close to Medgar Evers. We're friends, and he would use me, to establish, quote, a federal presence. He was a gutsy guy, and but anyway, a lot of people were, there were a number of people assassinated, as well as Medgar. He got me to interview Meredith at the time he was entering into the University of Mississippi. But those are past, the problems are still there. But what we have to do is see that, this is important. There was a fellow, Gene Gordon, in St. Louis, who came to me and said, we don't call ourselves Black or African Americans or anything. We're descendants of American slaves. So he formed Descendants of American Slaves for Economic and Social Justice. And then he said, we're against the reparations being demanded today, but we have a different definition of reparations. It's to repair the system. And so with these ideas, we will be able to provide not only for descendants of American slaves and Native Americans, but and all citizens, including descendants of slave owners. And I said, what about racists? And racists, everybody. Now that is the new message in dealing with racism. And the same thing, as I say, I'm confident that if America gets behind it, if Biden gets behind this, I think I think we can wake up the Chinese people. Because as I said, in an exchange which I had, they said they were Democrats and they were members of the party. They liked it. Is but I don't know what was said because it was being said in Chinese.
You got more optimism than I do, so good on you, I guess.
Why not?
I've gotten out of the optimism business long ago.
The one thing you can bet that the Chinese are not different.
No, I was just saying optimist that Biden would even look at this. So
anyway, this is great. I'm delighted you gave me an opportunity.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for your time. And everyone go underneath the show notes. We'll have a link to the website.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Norm.
Okay, bye now.